Hey. Okay. Curl. So yeah, I'm Daniel. I started this adventure a while ago. So I've been doing HTTP basically and internet protocols since the late 90s. I work for wolfSSL where I do commercial support and stuff around curl. I do curl full time these days. So curl is a command line tool and a library for doing internet transfers specified as a URL primarily. That's just to bring everyone on board here. So this whole thing started back in the day because, of course, from the beginning there was actually nothing. So, and we had some building blocks, you know, as everything. So I wanted to do something, and this year the movie premiered called Independence Day. It actually premiered around the autumn in 1996. Around the time when I started fiddling with HTTP, because I was writing an IRC bot at that time, as you do, right? So, and I wanted to get some currency rates for the bot so that we could exchange currencies in the channel. So what's 100 USD in Swedish crowns today? So I needed to download currency rates every now and then. So I started writing a little tool to do that. Currency rates, great for my bot. So I put it online. Great, everyone can participate and download their currency rates. Maybe they didn't, but okay. So time passed on, moved on a little bit, and someone started to offer currency rates on Gopher, so I did support for Gopher and FTP and stuff. And then 1998, I released curl in the spring of 1998, and it supported 3 protocols by then. And it was awesome, and everything was good. And it was such an great success immediately. So in December 1998, I have this awesome screenshot from the website. We had actually 300 downloads of that release. Massive success. So already less than a year in, 300 downloads in a single month. So yes, we already we hit it big time from the beginning. So and then we started adding things. Number of lines of code over the time in the project. That first release was, I think, around 2,000 lines of code. And by the year 2000, we had 20,000 lines. And now we're up in 160K, roughly. So that's the development, basically. And the number of contributors, people that have actually contributed, some reported bugs, written code, pointed out spelling mistakes, offered some clues. We keep all the names in a long list, and the size of the list is growing, and it's growing actually. It continues to grow really, really fast. As you can see here, we add a few hundred names per year now, so a lot of people actually chime in, most of them just once, but anyway, a lot of people. And also a number of command line options. It was less than 100 back in 2004. It's now 226 since a few days back. Yes, lots of it. But now we know a little bit more than those 3 protocols from 1998. Now, curl is sort of packed with a lot of internet protocol transfer stuff features. Pretty much everything you need to do when it comes to transferring stuff over the internet. And it wasn't only that, you know, the number of command line switches that increased like that, or number of lines of code. Actually, internet exploded, as you all know. So the number of sites on the internet has exploded far more than the number of lines of code in curl. Anyway, these days I tend to show this picture because curl has sort of developed to become the Swiss Army knife of internet transfers, and in particular HTTP being the primary protocol for users of curl, really. And the term just curl it has been used more than once. So what do people use curl for? Well, when I say curl, a lot of people, they recognize it from the command line tool, right? I've used it on the Linux servers since forever, and it worked the same way 10 years ago. What have you done since then? But people are actually using curl in these things, you know? It's basically in every internet server out there. All the big ones, they're using it. It's a default HTTP transfer protocol engine in PHP. That's a third of all the websites in the world, right? And it's in basically all the gaming consoles. It is in funny things like Blender. It's in your kitchen. It's in your watch. It's in most of those gaming consoles and other, you know, set-top box things. And it's, I think there's roughly 1 billion games with it installed. So everything is using it. So yeah, the media devices. And then the cars, 22. I know for a fact that 22 car brands are using curl, which isn't all the cars, but several hundred million cars at least. And of course, Mac installed it early on, and nowadays basically every TV has it too, and Windows ships it by default, and a few billion phones and tablets. A lot of curl installations, and it's rarely the system component, right? So in your typical phone in your pocket, you have curl installed in YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and everything, and they all have their own installations. So it's quite a lot of installations. And I once collected companies using curl, and it turned out to become a sort of pointless exercise. But a bunch of companies, I stopped updating it because it's sort of pointless. It's just too many names. And if I ever feel sad or sort of loaded by boring bug reports one day, I can sort of bring up this slide and look at it and think, just consider the mind-boggling number. A lot of installations. So we estimate there's around 7 to 10 billion installations of curl. Not that anyone really knows or cares. Most users, of course, they don't know that they run curl in your car or in your phone or whatever. It's just there everywhere. So curl is then the command line tool that uses libcurl being then the component that is actually used everywhere, not the command line tool. And it works like this, right? There's a tool, and there's a library, and all those networking things underneath. Easy peasy. So curl supports 24 protocols right now. All those, probably more than most people can even start to sort of mention. So they're based on SSH and TLS, a lot of them, and then there's the networking stuff underneath. And curl didn't really, as you saw, that was a gradual success or growth over time, sort of it spiraled off. And so how come all of those users are using curl? Well, over time, of course, people added bindings for the particular languages. So if you want to write your code in another language than C, which is the API, then of course native thing for libcurl, people have written bindings, so you could use one of these 60 different languages to access libcurl. So of course it's easy, whatever language you can, and most mortals can even think about 60 programming languages environments, but all of these are then accessing libcurl, which helps deployment, right? People adopt it, and you can write it in whatever of these languages, and libcurl will power your internet transfers. And of course, curl, as all others, we stand on the shoulders of others. So we can also build curl to use these. All the red ones here are actually third-party dependencies that you can build curl to use. And there are 30 of different ones. So basically, whatever you want to do with the protocols, there are a bunch of different independently developed third-party optional dependencies to use. Which, as you can figure out, adds a lot of complexity and many different combinations. A lot of these are actually sort of mutually exclusive. You can just use one. You can actually use many TLS libraries, but you have to pick one at runtime. Many of the others are actually mutually exclusive. So you can't use 30 at the same time, but in a countless number of combinations, literally millions. And it all is then provided with a single API, and most people, when they build their devices, you want to build a car thing or a watch, they just pick a particular selection of this that they like, and they build it and they run it in their own device, and they're happy with that. And also you can actually disable a lot of features at build times. You don't need to have all these enabled, which makes it, unless you trim the footprint and everything to make it work exactly the way you want to do it. And of course, over time then, this is C, right? The most portable language that you can imagine. So over time, and thanks to efforts from people, you can actually run it on quite a number of operating systems. Again, most mortals can't mention 71 operating systems. I can't suddenly. I'm going for 72 because then I could fill out that square up there, but I haven't found the 72nd yet. So of course, again, this is sort of spiraling over time. The more popular curl gets, the more people are porting it to other operating systems, and it goes on like that. And of course, this is the reason why they're using curl in all these particular devices, because they're using all these particular operating systems in their devices. So yeah, it also then of course run on basically whatever CPU architecture you can imagine that is at least 32 bits. Someone has run curl on it. in a lot of places. It has, to my great pleasure, then become so popular that you can actually also find it on nice boards on the NASDAQ. It's the NASDAQ building in New York, showing off a curl command line. Awesome. Or one of my favorite, I think sometimes people tend to ask me about sort of when in time did you realize that curl was actually starting to become something big, that we had many users. And I think maybe this was the moment in time, because here's a billboard in Silicon Valley. This is, I think, is 2012. It's a completely nonsense billboard. So it's no command line that doesn't work. It's just what? But it says curl in there. And the marketing manager emailed me later and was embarrassed about it. So it was a sort of extra bonus. So fun. Things are moving along, right? Everyone is using it. And when people are, it's a license, curl is licensed as MIT. It says in the license you can do whatever you want to do with its code, but you can't say that you wrote it, and you have to include a license somewhere in your documentation. And a lot of people are then putting the license in their about window somewhere. That about window can then appear in your car. So I get emails from people using cars, right? So I'm helping them use them. I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly what he wanted to do, but I get some of this, not all of this fun or confused, but yeah. You can imagine the level of desperation when I actually find my email address in an about window. I need to email that guy about my GPS. I had to include all the typos also from the original one. And another fun thing, so curl then becoming a more and more de facto tool for a lot of fiddling on the internet when you want to do HTTP transfers. Sometimes someone finds an exploit somewhere, right? So if you're like a big company, you have put up the device that you can exploit with a fun curl command line that someone shows on the internet. What do? Well, if you happen to be, for example, a company, you could just put in a little check, right? So that's how you fix exploits. Yeah, this is a router source code. Yeah. Just showing that curl is becoming fairly well used. And it's also popular in maybe not so fun areas. Like I once, back a few years ago, I noticed a real huge spike in downloads of a particular package from my website. Turns out that this malware was actually downloading curl from my site and used that curl installation to spread itself onwards. But they fixed that. So they downloaded it from my official website. I renamed it so they wouldn't find it, but they included it in their. In the next version of the malware, they actually bundled the version instead. Saved my website, but the malware continued to function. And actually, curl is very widespreadly used in malware. So all of these malwares are shipping with curl in them. Of course, I don't like that, but you know, I ship a tool. They can use the tool for whatever purposes they want. Unfortunately, I'll get back to why that might have some problems for me. But okay. So why do they use curl on all of these devices and malwares? Yeah, well, curl has been around for a long time. We've been polishing internet protocols for a long time. It's, you know, internet protocols they're in the RFCs. That's fine, but it doesn't really work like that on the internet, right? You have to polish off a lot of corners and you have to harden it over time. And we do that by having it open source. So everyone can participate. It's there everywhere. All the companies can use it, and we polish it, and it just moves on. And we support the same API. It works the same way. So it's also sort of, it helps to make it work better and better over the years. People can actually use this stuff 10 years ago. They can upgrade to the latest version today, and it'll just use the same API, and it just works. And as I said before, it's multi-platform. You can do it. A really good thing with just not modifying the API, basically, is that the documentation also gets a lot of time to ripen, really mature, and we can fiddle with details. And if you Google anything about curl and you find details from a long time ago, it's pretty much still valid. So it's really good. So yes, there's a lot of reasons why people like this. And again, footprint shaming and many TLS backends makes all these device manufacturers, they can actually just modify it and run exactly what they want with their particular device and support whatever they want. Right. And of course, people then usually often ask me, so what if you have gotten just a little tiny dollar for every installation? You would have been rich. But yes, but I released this open source already from the beginning because I thought open source was the only way to make this really good and really widespread use. So no, it wouldn't have worked. People wouldn't have used it. I would have given up with those 300 downloads in December '98, maybe. So no, it wouldn't have worked. So yeah, it's open source. It's perfectly out there and available for everyone to use. And I think that's the key to why we have succeeded. Of course, it brings some other challenges for me to get an income out of it too. But sure, it has been optimized for really, really widespread use. So how do we do this? First, you just get those 133 relevant RFCs that we need to read to support all these protocols, which is actually 260,000 lines of specs. I don't think anyone has actually read all those. I think I've sort of glanced on most of these, but it's a ridiculous amount of docs to read. But if you do that, or if you want to participate, you can often just ignore most of that because most of it is already read and understood. So as I said before, we're nowadays more than 2,000 people who have actually contributed to the project, contributed in the sense that you have helped out in some way, written code, written a bug report, come with good advice or had a brilliant idea. And out of these 2,000 people, there are about 730 humans that have written code that have been merged into Git. So, and out of these 730, there are about 150 per year that are actually contributing code. Most of them, again, they're single-shot contributors. So most, even code authors, they bring one patch once and never again. Out of these 150, about 12 people are actually doing more than 10 changes per year. Not really the same people either. So about 10, 12 people per year do actually more than 10 changes. And then is actually me down there. I actually do more than 10 changes, and I've done it for, well, too many years to even count. So, right, so we're 2,000 contributors. We do releases every 8 weeks, like so on the clock. So, and we are somewhere around 40, maybe 60 contributors per release. So still a lot of people coming in and a lot of newbies. So I'm doing a release in, I think, 3 weeks, and in this period, 5 weeks since the previous release, and I think we're about 20 newbies that have contributed code in this period. After 22 years, I think that's good, and I think it's awesome that we managed to do that. So we're increasing, we're getting more contributors and more help over time. But as I said, we're 10 to 12 people that are actually doing more than 10 changes per year, so we're a fairly small team that are actually sticking around and that I know from year to year. And we're all volunteers. Well, I'm not anymore, actually. I'm getting paid to do this, so I'm the only one that actually do this for a living. But it's still a tiny project with a fairly widespread use. And yeah, we're an old classic open source project from the 90s, so we do everything in the public and we do everything on mailing lists, even if we do use GitHub these days. Which GitHub is good because everyone has a GitHub account, so it lowers the bar and it makes it easy for everyone to contribute. So here's my home office, and so it's just me. So I work from home with myself. So okay, so we do this little project. We're a few people working on this, maintaining it year for year, and so 10 billion installations. So who pays for all this, right? Up until early this year, we were all spare time hackers. So we all did this on our copious spare time for the fun of it. There are occasionally companies stepping up and paying contributors to do something, but they usually just pay out for a feature and then they go away again. Very rarely you can actually get a company to pay for maintenance or fixing bugs over time because they don't care. They get their installation, they run with it. All of these big-time users, I can mention, all those popular apps on your phone that are installed more than 1 billion times. All of them have curl in them, but they're not here. They don't help out. They got their stuff and they're happy with it. So we instead have a bunch of more low-level sponsors. So I'm employed by wolfSSL, so I get to do this full time. We have my company Hacks that we're sponsoring things like the servers, and we have Haskell doing the CDNs. And then we have TeamViewer nowadays sponsors like more CI power. And then we have a bunch of little companies that just shoveling some money for us to spend on curl-related things. No big companies here. We're sticking around. So okay, we do things for billions of users, right? Or billions of installations. It's hard to count users. Who's a user here? So billions. So we started out, yes, we do code review. We of course have a code, we're actually doing the code style more and more strict, so that it becomes harder and harder to do crazy code. And we do most of that automatically, of course. To maintain or increase readability, code should be uniform everywhere. And of course we have I think it really helps to have a really good documentation to make sure that everyone understands the API. We don't do things the wrong way because we didn't understand it. And we do many tests, of course. Well, of course. We do as many tests we can. And we CI, as I say, like crazy. I'll show you a little bit about that soon. And we use all of these tools. We have static code analyzers, we do fuzzing, and we had an awesome code audit by Cure53 3 years ago. They found a bunch of things we should improve. Right, so nowadays we're at 90 CVs on counting, I think 94, 95, which I think is still quite okay after 22 years. They're still popping in every once in a while, so we're certainly not over anything, but security is hard, as I guess some of you know. So curl CI in 2019, we do around 60 builds per commit and PR, which of course doesn't really say anything, but we do all of these. We test code style and indenting and everything in there, and we do those thousands of tests in every of these test builds, and we do this on, I could say tens of platforms because it's not a specific number. It comes and goes really. Maybe it's 15 now. So we really try really hard to make sure that everything that is going into curl is actually sort of vetted to a fair extent before we merge it. It's really hard. As I said before, we have 30 third-party dependencies. You can run it on 71 operating systems and 20 CPU architectures. That's completely impossible to test. I don't even own half of, or sort of, I just have the ability to run them this on a fraction of all those. So we sort of count on that the most cases works in the most environments anyway, and it sort of works. We test the major platforms and the major things. And we run this on all the free ones, all the free services that we can get. And they're really good, because we can get a lot of CPU power out of these guys for nothing. Even if nowadays we have a sponsor that actually helps us pay out, so we actually pay for some of these now to get some more CPU power, because it takes forever to run these tests. It gets a little bit annoying when you have to wait for several days to get your PR merged just to get the CI green. And of course, we run scan build on all these code analyzers. Again, they're free static code analyzers. They're all pretty bad, except for Coverity, which is really good. The Coverity is not free, but they offer a free service for open source projects. So it's free for use for us, and that's web-based. So no, I can't run it on my local machine, but their scanners scan our code for us for free. So it's free for use for us, or for open source. I don't know. They have you can apply for it. And of course, we run Valgrind, and we do the Clang and these sanitizers. They're really good, and we can do the Clang Tidy, which for some reason isn't catching the same things as the sanitizers. And we have this fun torture test. I'll explain a little bit. That's also a fun test we do. And we are part of the Google OSS Fuzz effort, which fuzzing is fun, and we really, when everything else is green and happy and dandy, we throw it to the fuzzers, and they find a lot of crap and bad code. But we've done it for a while now. So OSS Fuzz is an awesome project. They found a lot of problems in our code, but of course over time it has started to shut up, and it doesn't find much more anymore, which is good. But it keeps going and hammering on our code. It runs on Google infrastructure, running fuzzes on our code nonstop all the time, a lot of machines. So it's pretty good. If they don't find anything, we know it's, I don't know what we know, but at least it doesn't find anything. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, they use a libfuzzer, right? And it's I'm not in charge of the fuzzer things. I can't really talk about most of the details about that, but no, sorry. So with the torture, I just wanted to mention that because we have this, I think it's pretty fancy setup. So you can actually build, if you build curl with a debug and you tell it to run a torture test, it'll run the test once, count the number of mallocs and fopens and stirrups. This is C code, right? So it counts all those, and then it just reiterates and run that test that number of times again, and make one of each calls to these functions to fail once each. So in a typical run, we might have 200 calls or 300 calls to malloc and fopen and blah, 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 and then just rerun the test 200 times and make each one of those fail once, which is an excellent way to just test error paths and failure. There should never be a memory leak. You should never crash. Everything should just be handled fine, even when we return failure for one of these. It's an awesome test. Again, that's a test that is horribly slow, of course, if it reruns 1,000 tests a few hundred times each. And some of those tests are really, especially when doing FTP, like multiple connections and everything, it takes forever. But it's an awesome test. So we had, of course, then to make sure that everything is as good as possible, we have these tests. So we fix all the warnings that we can get. And fixing warnings in C code on running on all these platforms, that's a challenge because, you know, one platform fix a bug or warning will introduce it on another, and vice versa. You have to if-def and blah, blah, blah. So it's really, really hard. I think this is more like a vision or a goal, fix all warnings on all platforms. We'll never get there, but we'll fix them and as good as we can. And we don't leave any defects found by any of these code analyzers. So we're strictly on 0 defects found by, for example, Coverity and all of those. Which is, I think that it in itself is also really hard because it's picky and it finds a lot of things. And we use the most picky compiler options you can find on all the GCC and Clang and everything on all these platforms, which is also makes sure that we don't have any particular obvious mistakes in there. Sure, we do still do mistakes. And we fix security issues as soon as we can, which again is tricky, but we do releases fairly often. So we do releases every 8 weeks, and I think we've had these 90 CVs, and I think that we at some point did a release without fixing a security problem we knew about already. But otherwise, it'll be fixing issues is often easier than finding the issue to begin with. But and then I said before, yeah, we have up to 30 different third-party dependencies. So how do you fix all those third-party dependencies? Because everyone is like a big tree, right? So how do you make sure that curl is safe when it uses all of that and everywhere? And the easy path for us is that no, we don't fix that because we only ship source code. So we lean pretty heavily on someone else to fix that problem. We make sure that we ship the best possible product source code-wise, and then someone else packages that and ships that to their users, which in most cases means that if you run curl on Windows or Mac or a Linux distro or BSD distro, all of those have their own maintainers. They maintain their dependency trees and installations and everything. So they are the ones that are going to update this. So when we release a fix, they update that and they ship that to your users, which I think is the ideal way to do it. It also makes it very simple for us. We actually have a little exception then because we actually ship binaries for Windows. But that's more out of a necessity because Windows is special. Let's not go there. Right. Well, this has the unfortunate side effect that in a particular, a lot of these hardware devices that I mentioned before, they will run old curl releases. That's just inevitable. We have this constant mantra on the mailing list and people coming back, oh, I have this bug with my system and I run curl from 2009, something doesn't work. And Jesus, they're using this. So we have this really, really long upgrade cycles from some of our users, and that's just the nature of things. And you know, I work like that, and it's certainly emphasized in all of these embedded things. They get their curl release once and they ship it and they don't upgrade it for a very long time. So we have this curl bug bounty introduced a while ago, and we hand out money for security problems that people find. And I think this is an awesome way for us to use donations and sponsorships from companies and users. We put them in a pile and we pay users or researchers or bounty hunters for the floors. And it's been a great success so far, and we're actually going to try to up the amounts going forward too, because we haven't found too many bugs and we have money. So we're going to pay more. The fewer, the more. Okay, this is me. I do this. So this is my primary hobby. People they ask me how I can keep doing this after 22 years, but this is my hobby, and everyone needs a hobby. So I do this I've done it about 2 hours per day since 1998. And nowadays I do it actually 8 hours a day first, and then 2 hours a day. So I can do it a lot. So yeah, I mix work and spare time. It's awesome. It makes you get a GitHub contribution pattern like that. And whatever you do for 20-something years, it adds up, right? So you can have, actually, the numbers are pretty high. So yes, it's a lot of time and a lot of commits, and I've sent a lot of emails, actually. So yeah. And maintaining also this kind of project. We're a small project, nobody helps us out with things. So usually maintaining, like what I do on my spare 2 hours, or nowadays full-time hours. Also, there's a lot of other things than just writing code, right? I'm here today talking. I'm doing user support, takes a long time, reviewing other pull requests, and actually trying to occasionally write new code and new features to make sure that curl stays ahead with the internet development in general. I mean, nothing stops, right? So the way we did internet transfers 10 years ago is totally outdated today. So today we do internet transfers differently. We need to maintain that and keep up with everything. So there's a lot of work, just a lot of different areas. And of course, people help out. So yes, I do this because I think it's fun. I started it because I needed currency rates. I kept on doing it because it was fun. I always did development, and a lot of people used it, and it was fun that a lot of people use it. So sure, it's sort of a circular thing, and yeah, why not? Everyone needs a hobby. Others do sports. I do curl development. And so I did it 20 years, and then I got a medal for it in 2017. but I was gonna and I was mentioning some of the sort of more shady users of curl. They also made it, yeah, sure, I got a medal, but I also got this from another source. So they don't let me into the US anymore. I don't know why, but I don't know if it's necessarily because of this, but I have my suspicions. So, okay. Going forward, of course, curl shipped 1998, 2019 now. It's going to be 22 years in the spring, but it doesn't stop here. It keeps on going. The rate is still fairly high, possibly higher than ever. More users than ever, more contributors than ever, more developers than ever, and it is open source. Everything is there. Everything is documented. If I get run over by a bus tomorrow, we can still continue. It's not my baby in that regard. There's no slowdown going forward. Right, you can help. And I have this roadmap for things going forward, and it's basically like that. I'll try to not foresee too much going forward. It'll be more. And yes, you can help. And I also wrote this little book called Everything Curl, which basically explains whatever you can do with curl in a lot of words, in a lot of pages. It's available for free and a PDF on the web, and is as a book too if you want to. That's it from me. Thank you.
We have time for questions, if there are any. No? Okay.
Was it the MIT license from the beginning?
No, it wasn't. I've actually experimented with different licenses from the beginning. It was actually GPL from the beginning. And it immediately struck me that GPL wasn't ideal for a lot of companies that didn't want GPL code. And then I switched to the MPL, Mozilla Public License, because I thought that fit more with the model in my head that I wanted to do things. But that ran into problems with GPL projects instead. So then, okay, let's go to MIT completely. As liberal as it gets, no problems for anyone really to use it. Possibly a problem for me to get code back. But I think we're compensated by having a really high pace of development, so people really don't want to keep their own stuff to themselves anyway, so they want to make sure that they contribute back so they can keep up with the development pace and upgrades. I think it has worked out good.
Does wget use libcurl?
No. They don't. The wget is actually founded as a project before curl. So, but I didn't find it. Back in the day when I wanted to get my currency rates, I didn't find wget, The search engines were crap. I don't know, I was probably a bad searcher, but I didn't find it, so I wrote my own. Might have been different if I found wget and used it. And over the years, I've actually tried to sort of hint to the wget that they would, benefit from using libcurl for their networking parts, but they've never really taken on to that. But I'm good friends with the wget maintainers. They're good people.
So you really didn't find it on Gopher? I'm so old, I remember Gopher.
I didn't find it anywhere.
So you answered most of my questions. I just one comment on the Toyota multimedia system. I have a Toyota. If I have found your email address there, I would have emailed you too.
Awesome. Yeah, I've actually got several emails from Toyota owners.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Any more questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.